That's a rocket.
Hi, everybody. My name is Keith Brooks. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of this show, whatever the fuck the show is, where I pitch you different ideas for movies or experiments in casting or what the fuck ever we're going to do. First of all, let's get it out of the way. I know I look like a traveling musician that only tours your local Applebee's. Here's what we're going to do today. I love comic book movies with a passion. Like, I haven't been touched by a woman in years. That's how much I'm dedicated to being a nerd. Today, what I want to sort of do is just an experiment. What if we took the casting from the failed DCEU and put that in the MCU? What would these actors correspond with? Where would they wind up? Who would play Iron Man? Who would play Legolas or whatever the fuck we're going to get into, right? So that's kind of what we're going to do. But because there are so many more MCU movies than there are DCEU, we're not going to get everybody. There's not going to always be like a 1-to-1 ratio. We're not going to cast every character from those films. But right now, we're going to sort of try to break it down in phases. And as we're doing that, talk a little bit about, I'm going to give you my opinion about these actors. I'm going to give you my opinion about these movies and all that jazz. And I'm also going to say, like, you know, in order of the DCEU, whatever that director is, that's going to be the director of our first. You know, Zack Snyder directed the first DCEU movie, so he directs the first MCU movie. That sort of idea. Oh, I can't explain things. Fuck. Oh, this is going to be a rough video. And like I said, we're going to break these down into phases just because it's a lot. And it'll be a lot to talk about. This video is not sponsored by Apple, though. God damn, I wish it was. Let me close out some of this pornography. We're going to start with phase 1 of the MCU. What it would look like should it be entirely comprised of actors and performers from the DCEU. Now, let me go ahead and say, I like the DCEU. I don't think all the movies are super fucking solid, but they're all, I own every single one of them. I think, I don't own Shazam Fury of the Gods yet, but I will. But I think they're all enjoyable. I even like Shazam Fury of the Gods. I thought it was a fun movie. That being said, I do think that there are so many problems that existed within that world of you know, like, not following through on ideas, dicking around with people's different, you know, directions and stuff like that. The whole Joss Whedon ordeal is a fucking nightmare. Everything that happened to Ray Fisher is so tragic and sad and all that jazz. And, you know, and Zack Snyder suffered a great loss, too. Zack Snyder is not my favorite director by any means. I think Zack Snyder is a really good filmmaker. I think he's a really shitty storyteller. I think he can paint a really incredible picture, but can never tell you what the picture means. I think as long as he's guided by a well-crafted script, damn, he's on fire. 300, Watchmen, I think his Dawn of the Dead is better than the original Dawn of the Dead. 300 and Watchmen are in some of my favorite films of all time. That's it. I think Sucker Punch is probably the worst movie ever made. Like, Army of the Dead's really bad too. Like, it's just really fucking, it's all, you know, style and no substance. I think Batman v Superman has some good moments. Man of Steel has some good moments. His Justice League, I think, is actually kind of great. But I think the problem with him has never been casting. His casting is phenomenal. I think it's all in the story. I think he just has a vast misunderstanding of who the DCEU characters were. Like, he wanted Wonder Woman to be a headhunter and shit, like, and Kryptonian, and like the Kryptonian thing, okay, whatever. But I think you're just taking that character in a very different direction. You know, he made this comment about how Superman is a you know, we always talk about Batman being a murderer and all that stuff that he did, but Superman loves T-bone steaks and beer is something he said, but Superman's vegan. But that's nitpicky, right? Whatever. I still think if the scripts would have been there, if the story would have been there, those actors would have fucking knocked it out of the park. So I'd be interested to see what they would do in other parts, because I think they're all incredible. I even like the idea of Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. But let's see what happens in this what if universe if they're put in a different world, namely the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I'm going to try to not make them replicate characters that they were in another world, or try to utilize them in a different way, that sort of idea. So the first with the MCU would be Iron Man, directed by Zack Snyder. I know it would be a much grittier version of Iron Man, but that could be cool. What would it change in opposition to like the bubblegum that the MCU has sort of become? And as Tony Stark, I would cast Henry Cavill. Look, Henry Cavill is, I think, a great actor who's never got a chance to show a personable side, really. Like the only time you really get it is a little bit in the Justice League version of Superman. That being said, I think he plays a lot of loners, and he plays a lot of men that are confident, but to see him play a man that's cocky, that would be an interesting thing. And more so to see a man that realizes how ineptly flawed he is. What a fun thing that would be to see him sort of explore. And also that billionaire playboy sort of idea. I think he would have a great time. Now, he needs a villain, and so I pick Kevin Costner's Obadiah Stane. Kevin Costner played an amazing Pa Kent. I think he was a great aspect of that movie. But to see him now in this villainous role, still a fatherly figure to Henry Cavill, because we know they work well together, but let's see him take that evil turn. I think he would, just tear into it and do something absolutely incredible with it that wouldn't be trying to replicate what Jeff Bridges did. And then as Rhodey, I would want to see Lawrence Fishburne. Look, it obviously changes the dynamic a little bit of their story, but to make Rhodes a little bit older than Tony and sort of see where that goes and how it changes the story, especially going forward. He's a more seasoned military man. Lawrence Fishburne's just great in fucking everything he does. So then as Happy Hogan, I would say Christopher Maloney. Let Christopher Maloney have some fun with this role, because I think Maloney is one of those actors that could do so much. If you've seen the show Happy, he's absolutely fucking incredible. So let's make him another Happy Hogan, as the bodyguard to this already fucking giant buff man. And then as Pepper Potts, I would pick Amy Adams. That seems like a no-brainer. And it does feel to an extent like it's replicating some of the stuff of, the love relationship they had. But I feel Pepper's such a different character than Lois Lane. And I feel that in the Snyderverse, Lois Lane never really got to do anything. She was always just baggage. And talk about one of the greatest actresses to ever live. So great of an actress, I made a movie about kidnapping her. Check it out on the channel. Not even joking. Kind of wish I was joking. In that film, we were also introduced to Nick Fury, and I would pick, personally, out of the DCEU cast, Ben Affleck. Let's go back for a second to the old school Nick Fury with the white sides of his hair. I think Ben Affleck could rock that the fuck out in a badass way. I think he would be absolutely phenomenal in it. Also in Iron Man, we're introduced to the character of Phil Coulson. I would do Ike Barinholtz. Ike Barinholtz shows up later in the Suicide Squad films, and he, I think as Coulson, is going to be a very different version than what we had. And maybe more of a doofus that you're rooting for sort of character, but that in of itself can pack a bigger punch with what happens in Avengers ultimately. And then we can't forget about Jarvis. And so for the voice of Jarvis, I would have Mark Strong. Plus that also tells you, something, he's going to become something bigger a little bit later. And I think that could be, a lot of fun. So let's move on to our second film within the MCU revisioned is The Incredible Hulk. So Zack Snyder directed the first two films for the DCEU. So he's coming back to direct a gritty version of The Incredible Hulk. And I think he could do a really, really great job with the idea of the body horror that The Incredible Hulk innately has. And I would love to see that sort of explored a little bit more. And I think with my lead, it would be fucking amazing. As Bruce Banner, I want Michael Shannon. Like, Michael Shannon, I think, is an incredible actor that has this raw intensity, and he's phenomenal as Zod. I think he's one of the people that really gets a chance to shine in these roles. So cool. Let's bring him and give him this conflicted scientific mind that is dealing with rage. And I think you'll get a better sense of that rage. And especially in the hands of Snyder, man, I think Snyder would knock it out of the park because he's such a rage-filled director. I don't think Snyder himself is a rage-filled person, but his movies have this angst to them. And I think something like The Incredible Hulk just sort of fits it. I think he would get that really well. As Thunderbolt Ross, I would have Russell Crowe. He played Superman's papa. Let's make him play a bad guy. Let's make him play this general that's hunting after his Moby Dick, right? As the leader, Samuel Stearns, I'm going to put Jesse Eisenberg in there. That meaning eventually when we get to Captain America 4, we can see him become the leader, but he sort of just fits that character really well. And I think he would be a really good scientific mind for Shannon to feed off of. For Betty Ross, I want to see Lauren Cohen. Look, this is my nepotistic pick of the thing, I guess, because I worked with Lauren on The Walking Dead, or at least I worked with her, I guess. She's a phenomenal actress. She's an incredible person, but she has such a range that I don't think the world has got the chance to see yet. And I think seeing her in this would be a great spotlight on her, all that jazz. I think it would be a super fun thing to do. As Emil Blonsky, Jason Momoa. Look, Momoa is getting so much fucking praise. People are going crazy over his devil in Fast X sort of thing. And yeah, let's keep that energy fucking going. I want to see more of that. I want to see more of this guy playing villains and strange characters. He's in this movie called, like, I think Wolves, where he plays a bad guy werewolf. Let's just see him be a badass in a different way than he was as Arthur, like a military badass that is a, black ops fucking man who doesn't mind becoming a monster. Plus, it gives us this interesting opportunity of seeing Michael Shannon, who I'm sure is an attractive male, but not the conventionally attractive that Momoa is, trying to keep the monster within him, and Momoa, who was a beautiful specimen of humanity, volunteering to become the monster because his monster's different. So we have some interesting themes there. And then as the Doc Samson character, I would have Scoot McNairy. He appears in the Batman versus Superman, and I think he would be great for that psychiatrist, psychologist sort of other man thing that Shannon has to deal with. I just think it'd be a lot of fun. Let's move on to our next film, Iron Man 2. Now, this one's the first time we get a different director. This would be by David Ayer. Look, I think David Ayer is a really great filmmaker that got shafted by Warner Brothers. I don't know what his Suicide Squad cut would be. I know his scripts are phenomenal. I know End of Watch is a great fucking movie. I know I really fucking enjoyed Bright. So I would be super interested to see what he would do with an Iron Man 2 storyline, especially a story that's sort of about revenge. I think he does really great when it's like partnering up stories. And this isn't necessarily that. I mean, you could have some more aspects of that with Rhodey, but yeah, I would just be interested to see what he could do with it. And so for our new cast members, I would have Ensha Trow as Black Widow. I think she, obviously has that mesmerizing look, and I think she could totally, even in Man of Steel, you see this lethal aspect of her, and I would be interested to see that play out in a less villainous way, but maybe villainous way. You don't really know, and so you could play into that. Is she spying on Tony? Is she not? That sort of idea. As Justin Hammer, I would bring in Jeremy Irons. Now, again, we're playing with the age and making him older than the Rockwell character, but this sort of falls in line more with the actual comic books. And I think it would be, yeah, man, just like a lot of fucking fun to see Irons in that opposing Cavill. So, just hating him and being the sniveling rat of a fucking character that's trying to be the congressional aspect of it. I think that would be absolutely phenomenal. And then for Whiplash, I would have Ezra Miller. Look, Ezra Miller has had a lot of controversy. And some of that's true and some of it we don't know about. Some of it seems to have some doubt on it. But I think at the end of the day, controversial aspects of that person aside, I think Ezra Miller, they are a fantastic performer. They just have an innate great creative streak and quality of the characters that they create. And I think as Whiplash, to play a very different bitter Hamlet that's covered in fucking tattoos and is a genius that's quiet with a bird, yeah, that's awesome. Sign me the fuck up. I think Ezra would crush it. Next in the franchise, we would have Thor, directed by Patty Jenkins. Look, I love Monster. I love Wonder Woman. Hate Wonder Woman 84. But I think there's some good, awesome stuff in Wonder Woman 84. And I don't think it's as bad as everybody says it is, but it's not good, especially compared to those other two. But with Wonder Woman, that first one, Patty Jenkins really delivered on this idea that she can tell you a fantastical story. And it's wonderful that it just fits so well in the chronology of it, but also I just think she could do it like super, super well. So I would love to see what Patty Jenkins does with a Thor film. So here's my cast for it. As Frigga, I would have Diane Lane. Because again, it's fucking Diane Lane. Diane Lane could be 197 years old and still be the most beautiful woman on the face of the earth. As Jane Foster, I would have Christina Rinn. Look, we didn't get to see a lot of Christina Rinn throughout the films that we saw her in, but I think Jane Foster, that science aspect, maybe even go back to the original comic source material and make it more of a medical doctor sort of idea. I don't know, whatever. We're still trying to stick within the MCU and what it does, but I think that would be a lot of fun. As Odin, Harry Lennox, you cannot get better than that. Like, Hopkins is great. Let's go a completely different route. And I think Lennox could bring this weird sort of, I think you would be able to see the heartbreak in Odin a little bit more in Lennox than you did in Hopkins. Not saying that Hopkins did a bad job. Hopkins felt godly in everything he did, but still giving it a different idea. As Lady Sif, I would say Tao Okamoto. I just think that would be an interesting direction for the character. I think it would be a lot of fun. I think she would kill it. I think she would crush it. And also, it would be interesting to play into that her versus Foster sort of idea. As Loki, Callan Mulvey. Look, we're never going to be able to replicate the power of Hiddleston's Loki because it's such an iconic portrayal. But I think if you're trying to go a different direction, let's make it just more a fucking douchebag and less lovable douchebag at that. And I think Callan Mulvey could really pull that off. Now, another person that appears in the Thor film is the character of Hawkeye. And for the Clinton Barton role, I would cast Ray Fisher. Give Ray a chance to do something that, I think can have a lot of different possibilities to it. We know the arc that Hawkeye now possesses from being just this elite sort of gun for hire sort of idea with S.H.I.E.L.D. to then becoming a bad guy momentarily in Avengers, and then eventually later in his own series being this man that's just tired and has had his ass kicked. And I think Ray Fisher is such a good actor. He can accomplish all of those things in a way that feels different than what Renner did, because Renner did it sort of brilliantly. As Thor himself, Jai Courtney. Look, I think Jai Courtney gets shit on a lot, but I think Jai Courtney is a great fucking actor that has a versatility that we never really acknowledge. And I think that at first it would seem like an obvious no-brainer for Jai Courtney, and you sort of would understand or have an expectation of him playing the role a little bit safe. But I think he could really get into that self-evaluation in a different way than what Hemsworth did. And I think Hemsworth is now synonymous with that character and is so rich in his performance and so fucking way too talented. But I think Courtney could pull it off in a different way. As Fandral, I would want to see Scott Eastwood. Look, I'm going to be honest, I don't think Scott Eastwood's that great of an actor. Or at least I haven't seen anything he's done that's made me go, oh, wow. But Fandral, I think he could do that. Totally. I think it would give him a chance to sort of challenge some of the expectations of him. You know what I mean? And that would be fun. As Hogan, I would want to see Eugene Braverock. change up what these characters are and just have some fucking fun with it. And Eugene Brave Rock deserves a role that sort of puts him in the spotlight. So that would be a great thing to watch. As Volstagg, Cooper Andrews from The Walking Dead and Shazam as Volstagg. Look, Coop is the nicest fucking guy you're ever going to meet in your life. He's just so welcoming and he's smiling and he laughs and all that stuff. So to have Scott Eastwood, Eugene Brave Rock, and Cooper Andrews as the Warriors 3, you have two that feel like they're unapproachable, and then Volstagg is the center that sort of holds it all together. And I think that would be just a blast. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't say rest in peace to the great Ray Winstone, who originally portrayed this character. And then to wrap out my Thor cast, I would have as Darcy, who I think we all just fucking love, Danielle Brooks, who we all just fucking love. Look, she's so smart. She's so sassy. She's so funny. She's so intelligent. She's such a good actress. To see her be able to be that piercing aspect to every scene and bring the spotlight on her, man, what fun that would be. Our next film, Captain America, The First Avenger. So this would initially be directed by Zack Snyder, and then halfway through it's going to be fucked up by Joss Whedon. I think Snyder could do a really great job if we get him to focus on the harshness of the war aspect, and then I think Whedon can be really great with that Americana aspect of it, right? I think he would do phenomenal with all of that. Here's my cast for it. As Captain America, Michael Cassidy. Look, he was barely a part in one of these movies, but he looks like a fucking Captain America. And I think he could really represent the boy in red, white, and blue, that star-spangled hero that we need. He looks like it. It would be great to watch him. And then I think he would pair really well with Peggy Carter, in my version, played by Carla Delevingne. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I don't know. Look, I think she's phenomenal in almost everything I've ever seen her in, except for Suicide Squad. I really hated her in Suicide Squad. And I don't know, it's hard for me to sort of assess why. Her movements and everything were super fucking cool. It's just like I didn't feel the connection to the character at all. But I think she's good and totally could pull this off. Next, as Red Skull, I would see Joel Kinnaman. I think Joel Kinnaman is another one of those actors that I think is phenomenal, that gets lumped into this Jai Courtney sort of aspect where people just sleep on him. But I think he's great and has an amazing range. And so to see him sort of step out of what we know him for as this heroic character and see him dive into being a fucking Nazi, a Hydra soldier, that would be a lot of fun. I would totally enjoy that. And as his right-hand man, Zola, I would want Arnim Zola. I would want to see David Thewlis. I think, again, the bounce between those two, David Thewlis does everything wonderful, but to see him sort of as a respective, bumbling sort of sidekick to the Red Skull up until we get to Winter Soldier and he returns now empowered in a different way, man, that would be a lot of fun. As Erskine, the doctor that changes Cap into who we know, I would love to see Danny Houston. I don't think there's anything that man can't do. And to see him as this gentle doctor would feel so different than some of the other parts that we've seen him play. And I think would be just a blast. It would be a lot of fun. As the Tommy Lee Jones character, I would want to see J.K. Simmons. Give him this general that's a hard-nosed, hard-edged World War II America man in the 1940s eating T-bones and milk. Like, yeah, fuck yeah, I want to see that. I see J.K. Simmons in anything, but this sounds like a lot of fun. And then as Bucky Barnes, who we know has a huge future within the MCU itself, DJ Catrona. I just think he would rock it. He looks it. To see him with our Cap, Michael Cassidy, I think it would be a blast. I think it would be a wonderful experiment of a film. Yeah, I think it would be fun. Now, to wrap out our phase 1, we have The Avengers, directed by James Wan. Dude, can you imagine what the alien hordes are going to look like? Directed by James Wan? It's going to be fucking terrifying. That change alone completely alters the way we view the MCU. But here are our new characters that we are introducing in this film. There's only 2 of them, but I think they're 2 great ones to introduce. As Maria Hill, I would want to see Wunmi Mosaku. Look, she is phenomenal. I didn't even realize she was in the DCEU. She's amazing in Loki. I think seeing her as Maria Hill, giving her a bigger spotlight, being the right-hand man to fucking Ben Affleck's Nick Fury, yeah, that's sign me up all fucking day. And then at the very end of the film, we would see the reveal of our big bad guy for the Infinity Saga. It's Thanos. And in this one, we're going to hear a little bit of his voice and who's going to be voicing him. But Batman's dad from the DCEU, Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Look, I've never met Jeffrey Dean Morgan. We were on the same show and stuff like that. But what a fucking performer he is. Dude. Can't wait to see what he would do with something like this. Yeah, that's a good phase 1. If I don't touch my own self real quick, if I can, masturbate myself a little bit. That's some good material. Now, obviously, there's some actors we haven't talked about. We haven't even got to Gal Gadot yet, right? But that's coming in phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, all that jazz. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to hear me pitch. Let me know what you want to hear me cast. All that jazz down below. And go fuck yourselves. Bye, guys.